Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk about paid menstrual leave. But before we dive into this LinkedIn post, I want to introduce you to the post author. Her name is Tori Dunlap. She is the founder of a website called Her First 100K. Her claim to fame is that she saved $100,000 before the age of 25, and she has built this massive personal finance media empire out of it. Her goal is to fight the patriarchy through empowering women to earn more money. And so you might be asking, well, how does she do that? So she offers two really awesome programs. So the first is the 100K Club. And if you want to join, it's about $500 a year. And you can access videos in her learning library, do live coaching calls with her, monthly accountability sessions, yada, yada, yada. And then, of course, the real creme de la creme of the personal finance community is investing programs. So she offers that as well. If you want to join, you have to go through her sales page, and then eventually it'll take you here to checkout. And it only costs you $1,000 to learn how to invest. No big deal. I obviously am being highly sarcastic with all of this. I've been a writer in the personal finance space for years, and I have developed such a disdain for these people. Nothing against Tori, she does her thing, but there's just so many people like her that are snake oil salesmen and saleswomen, and they have no scruples about conning you out of your money. There's nothing she can possibly teach you that you can't teach yourself. And the reason why I know this is because if you go to her LinkedIn profile, look at all of her credentials, okay? She graduated college in 2016. That's when she started her first 100K, which was a blog back then. So she studied organizational communication and theater. Okay, she graduated in 2016. She's scrubbed her LinkedIn page, so it talks about her owning her own vending machine company. Cool. But then after that, it really just highlights her entrepreneurial journey. She had a girl job, like a real job, after she graduated in 2016. So she had a big girl job. And then 3 years later, she magically saved $100,000. I've read before that, her parents kind of helped her out. So, it's nice when you don't have to, pay for college and that kind of thing. And you're able to, save 100K that way. But anyways, she's one of many, feminists out there who are conning women into thinking they need to pay for courses to learn how to invest, and then has, built this massive media empire around it. So that's Tori. If you ever want me to do a deep dive into the personal finance world, I would love to do that. Leave a comment below. I have a lot of interesting stories from that period of time in my life. But anyways, I want to get back to this post. So she posted this yesterday, and she talks about things she does as a female boss that send men into a coma. Okay, she shuts her company down once a quarter to give her employees a paid collective week off. So that's 4 weeks a year of time off. I'm assuming this is also on top of PTO. They welcome kiddos into their meetings, which I guess, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I guess it depends on the meeting. She doesn't care where you work from. Take meetings from a European cafe or school pickup. I'm going to take a little bit of gripe there. You can't just work from anywhere. Like, you can work from anywhere in the sense that you can be physically located in different places, but you need time to focus to actually get work done. So if you can do work while you're in the school pickup line, I'm going to argue you're probably not doing really important work. You're probably just like checking emails, or you're on like a Zoom call or something. But the most important one of these benefits that I wanted to call attention to is we give employees paid menstrual leave. I have no idea what this is. This is wild to me. And there's just so many problems here. I think you could file an EEO complaint about this, because there is clear discrimination in how this is applied. There's no way you can equitably apply a policy like this to all employees of your company. There's clear preferential treatment here. Of course, to her credit here, let's go back to her about page. Okay. If you look at her team, It's clear they are all the same type. So it doesn't look like she employs men. So, of course, the feminists in the room would have a field day if they saw a company like this that only had men. But, the opposite is, of course, okay. It's okay to have an all women's company promoting stuff like this. And who knows, honestly, if any of them have any credentials. I didn't mention this when I should have called this into attention when I was going through her LinkedIn, but she has no credentials. She's not a certified financial professional to my knowledge. She's not a CPA. I don't know if any of these people on her staff are CPs of any kind, certified professionals. They all look like overpaid, girl white collar jobs that are all going to be automated in the next couple of years. I don't see anyone here who has actual qualifications and experience to teach you how to invest. They're just in the business of selling you a narrative about feminism and investing and then pretending to teach you how to invest. But again, I digress. Okay. So they only have women on their team. So they give, they give their employees paid menstrual leave. So here's why I have a big issue with that. And here's why that is actually anti-feminist and anti-women. Okay. For one, everyone experiences their periods differently. Okay. Some young women get it, really early. Some it's heavier than others. Some it's more painful. Everyone has a different experience. So right off the bat, you can't apply a standardized policy, at least from a human resources benefits perspective. You can't apply a standardized policy because everyone experiences this differently. And to give you an example, folks who get IUDs, women who get IUDs, typically don't get their periods after they have their IUDs. And this is one of the appeals of getting an IUD. So basically, menstruation stops altogether. Okay. So if someone has an IUD and they don't have physical evidence of their period and they're not tracking their fertility cycle, so they have no idea where they are in their cycle. It's not just about bleeding. This is a whole cycle with hormones and there's different phases and stuff. It's not just the few days a month where you bleed, right? There's a lot more to it. So if you're not bleeding and you have an IUD, you're probably not tracking where you are in your cycle. So how can you possibly get paid menstrual leave off if you're not experiencing the symptoms associated with paid menstrual leave? Likewise, if you are someone who has a condition like PCOS, or endometriosis or any other, condition where the conditions of PMS and all the symptoms you experience are amplified and you have a heavier cycle, you're more intense cramping, are you entitled to extra time off? How do you determine who gets time off here? And I say this as someone who I had an IUD and I still got my period, right? So I got my period, but it was a little bit lighter than it had been in the past. But I was someone who still got my period, which is pretty rare for women who have IUDs. So how do you apply this paid time off policy? Do you just get the same 5 days every month as time off if you're not exhibiting symptoms? And then if you are exhibiting more extreme symptoms, do you get 7 days off? Do you get 10 days off? How exactly is this applied? Because you have to apply it equitably, right? These people are all about equity and equality. So how do you apply it equitably? Okay, so that's issue number one. Issue number two, feminists are trans inclusive, so they consider trans women to be women. There are certain trans women who have gone into TikTok and they've posted videos about this, of experiencing PMS symptoms, experiencing a period. Okay, there's an obvious problem with that in that these trans women, these people who are on hormonal treatments, these biological men who are on hormonal treatments, do not have a uterus and they do not have a cervix. So, just basic biology here. Cramps are not just a bunch of hormones that suddenly facilitate pain in your body. There's a organ that transmits that pain, and so if you don't have a cervix, you're not gonna feel the pain. There's people have tried to simulate it, but at the end of the day, it's a very unique pain that is kind of hard to describe. I think it's the only corollary is a guy getting kicked in the balls. Like, I will never experience what that's like, in much the same way that a biological man will never experience cramping. Okay. Now there's other stuff that goes with your period. There are hormonal changes. You crave certain foods, you get moody. Some women have like really aggressive mood swings. You might get nauseous. Obviously, cramping is the big one. But again, just like with your actual like period and blood flow, like those symptoms manifest very differently from person to person. And depending on what kind of birth control you're on, which I'm presuming most of these women are on some form of birth control, you're going to have different symptoms. So I've talked about this in a separate video. Women who are on the pill, who are on hormonal contraceptive, they are going to have much more intense mood swings. Whereas women who are have an IUD, they might not experience anything at all. So again, like, how do you apply this? And then if you have hypothetically, you have a trans woman who goes to work for Tori's company, and Tori's feminist persuasion dictates that they must accept that trans woman as a woman. Does the trans woman who is not experiencing a menstrual cycle, cannot experience a menstrual cycle, going to get the same paid time off as women who do experience a menstrual cycle? I don't know about you, but that's like so offensive to me. Just because, like, periods are annoying, right? Like, I don't think anyone particularly likes their period, but it's just like, it's part of what it means to be a woman. So it's offensive that there's biological men who cosplay as women, like Dylan Mulvaney, those types of people. They cosplay as women, they pretend to be women, and then they're going to further caricaturize the experience of being a woman by pretending to experience the same real pain that women experience. And it's just so offensive that anyone thinks that is okay, intolerable. But I digress. Okay, so you have that issue. Like, how do you apply this standard and this policy to someone who is not a woman but identifies as a woman and is thus accepted as a woman in the feminist community? Okay, third issue. This is clearly an ageist policy. Not all women menstruate. Okay, so typically, it's gotten earlier, unfortunately, I think because of our diet and lifestyle. But usually in your teenage years, you're 12, 13, 14 is when you start your period, right? And then you continue your period, again, depending on, your lifestyle, and your own personal health, until your early 40s, late 40s, somewhere in there. And then you go through a period of perimenopause, which is the transition between menstruating and menopause, and then you go into menopause. Okay. So this paid menstrual leave only really applies to working age women who are menstruating. So women in their 20s and women in their 30s. Okay. I didn't see anyone based on these pictures who is in their 40s. Maybe this Megan Walker looks like maybe she could be in her 40s, but they look like to be young. So probably in their 20s. But imagine she had this policy. This policy is in place, and you have a woman in her, mid to late 40s who has applied to work at this company. Like, does that woman get perimenopause leave or like hot flash time off? Like, we're going to give the young women paid menstrual leave, but we're not going to give older women like hot flash leave. And I think this really gets at the whole feminist narrative and why I find it to be so anti-woman. Is that it's not applied equitably to all women. There are different phases of life, different experiences, all with different physical symptoms and also hormonal symptoms as well. So, women go through life and they have all these changes. And the focus amongst feminists is childbearing age women, right? They're obsessed with reproductive health. They're obsessed with abortion. But when it comes to older women who are aging out of being able to bear children, they don't care. They don't talk about women's health post age, 40. No one cares about that. It's only women who are of childbearing age. And you can see that with a policy like this. How on earth are you able to apply this policy to a woman who is, 40 years old? And then, of course, this wouldn't apply to biological men who also identify as men. They're not going to be able to take paid menstrual leave off. So can they take like a commensurate mental health day off, or mental health days, because your period lasts for multiple days? Are we talking like, this is the thing. How many days off are these women getting? Because if you're closing your company every quarter for a week off, and then every month, women get a week off for their period, like they're not working. Like you can't get anything done. I would be curious to know like how productive this company is, if with just so much time off. I'm all for taking care of your health and doing what you need to do. But at some point, like you have to call a spade here. Um, and I think this is just absolutely absurd. But it's just the feminist narrative is to talk about equity and equality, and this is anything but that. It doesn't apply to men. It doesn't apply to older women. It's going to apply to trans. It has to apply to trans men or trans women, because the logic of feminism is that trans women are women, so therefore they qualify for the same type of leave, even though like they don't have a uterus or a cervix to justify that kind of leave, right? And then every woman is different, and you're going to have women with different lifestyles and different life experiences and different, health conditions that are going to merit different amounts of time off. And of course, this is a slippery slope for other types of things. Like, okay, you start with paid menstrual leave today. Tomorrow, the ADHD person in your office is going to ask for time off, or the neurodivergent person is going to ask for time off. So then you're going to have neurodivergent leave. Okay. And then you're going to have, a person of color come in and demand reparations or time off that is commensurate with their, you know, determination of what a reparation should look like. So instead of, working 5 days a week, maybe they're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to work 4 days a week, and the fifth day is reparations for, past crimes. You might have someone who, makes that argument. Like where do you draw the line here? At some point, you're not going to have anyone working at all. And maybe that's the point of all of this. I don't know. But I saw this, and I just couldn't. This is why no one wants to invest in female-owned companies and female-run companies and female-founded companies, because this is the type of leadership that is exhibited by these companies, and this is a terrible return on investment for investors. No one wants to invest in this. I would be curious to know how much investment she's gotten for this company. I can guarantee there's folks sitting in San Francisco and on Wall Street who, don't want to touch these types of businesses. And that adversely affects genuine women who are building legitimate companies and need actual funding, because you have girl bosses like this who are pushing this agenda, and they're making the case for why it's a bad investment on a bad return on their capital. And it's not because like of putting your people first. I think there's a good reason to put your people first. It's where do you draw the line, right? It's a slippery slope of continuing to concede ground and do this and do that. And I think, the paid menstrual leave is just completely absurd. Okay, I can get behind, welcoming your kids into the office, under, the right circumstances, if you can, like, and you want to, maybe you can't do deep work while you're in the school pickup line, but if you want to take a phone call, okay, can take concessions there. Obviously, paid family leave, and mentoring programs for family members. Okay, like I'm all for that kind of stuff and taking care of and investing in your people. But at some point, you have to draw the line on what is absurd. And I think paid menstrual leave is the most egregious and absurd benefit I have ever seen coming from a women-owned company. I would love to know what you think. Like how do you apply for, something like this? And if you're a business owner and you had this policy, and this is important too, because people don't understand is what becomes policy in a handful of places like this, and it becomes mainstream, it snowballs. And so eventually it's required everywhere. That's how you get, sexual assault training and sexual harassment training, and mandated in workplaces across the country. And if you've ever sat in some of those trainings, they're pretty ridiculous. But it becomes like a compliance requirement for states in different states. And if you're a business in that state, it becomes a barrier to entry. Like if you like, I'm from New York originally, and New York has that requirement. It's like, why would you want to hire people that you're going to have to spend overhead on training them how to be decent human beings? Like, it's just, the absurdity is insane. So if you normalize that, you normalize all the DEI stuff, eventually you're going to get to a point where you start normalizing paid menstrual leave. And then again, back to what I was saying in this entire video, how do you standardize it? How do you implement it? How do you ensure it's applied equitably across all employees? Of course, you can't do that. There's no way to do that. So someone is going to get the short end of the stick. And then how do you justify, people who work more and people who work less, but they're paid the same? There's a clear inequality there. How ironic. But I'd be curious to know what you think, if you would support something like this, how you would apply it, like what your opinion is of paid menstrual leave. Yeah, I would be curious to know. I think it's completely absurd. I don't know how I don't know how this is a thing, and I don't know why this is something worth celebrating on LinkedIn. Like, uh it's clearly insane. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this reflection and take on this post, I'd love it if you'd like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.